Welcome to Coffee with Viking. I am Mike. Cheers. Visions of End Times. Daniel 7:2. I, Daniel, saw a great storm churning the surface of a great sea, with strong winds blowing from every direction. Daniel's book closes with a series of visions so bewildering that the angel Gabriel had to come and explain them. Even then, Gabriel's explanations don't begin to answer all the questions. In chapter 2, Daniel spake of four kingdoms, visions now bringing him back to that theme. He sees four animals that represent four world powers. In one vision, the beasts are a winged lion, a bear, a winged leopard, and a horrifying creature with iron teeth. And in a second vision, he sees a shaggy goat breaking off both horns of a strong ram. Without naming nations, Gabriel explains that the four creatures of Daniel's first vision represent four world superpowers. In explaining the second vision, however, Gabriel does name nations. The two-horned ram represents the kings of Media and Persia. The shaggy male goat represents the king of Greece. The fourth kingdom may be Babylon, suggested by an earlier reference to a winged lion. Archaeologists have recovered from Babylon's ruins many pictures of winged lions. As powerful as these four empires are, with Alexander the Great commanding the most territory, from India to Libya, they're just the hint of a speck in the universe compared to what's coming. As my vision continued that night, I saw someone like a son of man coming with the clouds of heaven. He approached the Ancient One and was led into his presence. He was given authority, honor, and sovereignty over all the nations of the world, so that people of every race and nation and language would obey him. His rule is eternal. It will never end. His kingdom will never be destroyed. And that is in Daniel 7:13 and 14. I saw in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven, and came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. And there was given him dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all people, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed. In his final visions, Daniel sees suffering ahead, along with cosmic battles between angels and demons, but he also read a clear reference to resurrection and eternal life, a rarity in the Old Testament. For a familiar reference in Job See page 153. Job's resurrection hope. Go ahead, try to find any reference in the Old Testament to life after death. They're all over the New Testament, but it seems that most people in Old Testament times had no idea they could rise again and spend forever with God. Most Old Testament characters talking about death had none to say about an afterlife, though a few mention a shadowy place of the dead where they expect to live with their ancestors. The godly king Hezekiah had an even bleaker take on the afterlife. In a song of praise to God for healing him, he wrote, "For the dead cannot praise you. Those who go down to the grave can no longer hope in your faithfulness. Only the living can praise you as I do." Job is an exception, speaking from what must feel to him like the brink of death. He sounds like a man with New Testament savvy, living 2,000 years ahead of his time. But as for me, I know that my Redeemer lives, and he will stand upon the earth at last, and after my body has decayed, yet in my body I will see God. I will see him for myself. Yes, I will see him with my own eyes. I am overwhelmed at the thought. And that is Job 19:25 through 27. Many of those whose bodies lie dead and buried will rise up, some to everlasting life and some to shame and everlasting disgrace. That's Daniel 12:2. And many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. Daniel's most famous vision, however, has Gabriel talking about a perplexing period of 70 sets of 7, which is in Daniel 9:24. "70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city to finish the transgression and to make an end of sins and to make reconciliation for iniquity and to bring in everlasting righteousness and to seal up the vision and prophecy and to anoint the most holy." That, Gabriel says, will mark the end of rebellion and the coming of an anointed one. Many scholars interpret the 70 sets as 70 years. So 70 years of 7 becomes 70 years times 7, 490 years. Yet others consider the number symbolic, meaning that all of these events are completed in God's perfect timing. Bible experts and those not so expert have interpreted this vision every imaginable way. Some see Daniel's closing visions as a source of clues about the second coming. William Miller, a Bible teacher in the early 1800s, used Daniel's numbers to predict that Jesus would return on October 22, 1843. which every time anyone tries to predict the second coming, they're always wrong because no one knows. Miller started by presuming that 2,300 evenings and mornings refers to years that the Anointed One in chapter 7 points to Jesus, but many scholars today say Daniel's visions do an excellent job of describing the reign of a Greek tyrant named Antiochus IV Epiphanes from 175 to 164 BC. He executed the Jewish high priest who, like Israel's kings were sometimes called God's anointed ones. He also banned the Jewish religion and desecrated the Jerusalem temple in some way, perhaps by setting up pagan symbols or by sacrificing a forbidden animal such as a pig. Many Bible experts say Daniel is referring to these events when he says this: he will put an end to the sacrifices and offerings, and as a climax to all his terrible deeds, he will set up a sacrilegious object that causes desecration until the fate decreed for this defiler is finally poured out on him. Jews rebelled against Antiochus and won their independence. Daniel's visions have one main point: suffering lies ahead for God's people, but the suffering will eventually end. These prophecies point to Daniel's future in our past, yet at times it seems that they point to our future as well, the end times when God sets up a perfect kingdom. Bible prophecies sometimes get their job done in 2 time zones. Some of Isaiah's prophecies, for example, spoke of events in his time that later applied to Jesus as well. Daniel presses for details. How will all this finally end? He asked Gabriel. Gabriel's answer sounds like good advice for all believers craving more details about future events. What I have said is kept secret and sealed until the time of the end, Gabriel says. Go your way until the end. At the end of the days, you will rise again to receive the inheritance set aside for you. Stay blessed. Stay caffeinated. Much love.